Well, good morning and Shabbat Shalom and welcome back. This is Rabbi Ed Feinstein and Rabbi Marc Gellman, and we are delighted to welcome you back to Valley Beth Shalom Torah study for a Shabbos morning. It has been a lovely summer. It's an awfully warm summer, but a lovely summer. Rabbi Gellman, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm here in Aspen as the rabbi of the Aspen Jewish congregation, and it's very high up in the air here. And I want to thank you for visiting and doing a wonderful panel discussion with us. It was great to see you and Nina, and I'm glad to be back. And I'm glad that the community that studies with us didn't want to pull you back into the synagogue because that would have cut me off. So
Well,
thank you
they
all.
still do, but it turns out there's even more people watching us from their kitchens and their bedrooms and their dens. So
I
I'm
see.
so delighted that everyone is back. I hope it's been a wonderful summer. We begin the month of Elul. We begin the last month of the Hebrew calendar, which means Rosh Hashanah is only in 4 weeks, coming up right away. And we hope that everyone is beginning to make preparations to celebrate the new year and to do the hard work of introspection, self-evaluation that comes along with tshuva, which comes along with this time of year. And we're opening the book of Deuteronomy. This week we are in Parshat Shoftim, which begins with the phrase Shoftim v'shotrim titen lahem. You're supposed to establish magistrates, officers, judges, an entire justice system in order to govern the people of Israel once we arrive into the promised land. And there is a deep, deep wisdom to this that I'd like to sort of explicate as we get into it. In this parsha, we are told that judges are to be appointed. We are told that judgment is to be offered in a certain way. There's a civil and a criminal procedure for adjudicating cases and litigating conflicts. And then the Torah says, but if there is a problem, a case, a circumstance that is beyond you, a case that you don't quite understand, you don't quite know how to work out, Torah says you're supposed to go to the place that God has chosen and there talk to the elder who has been chosen by the community, the magistrate who has been elevated, the Levite who teaches Torah in the community, and find the answer to the problem. And I find this a remarkable statement because it is not what you thought the Torah was going to say. You thought the Torah was going to say, go to the place that God has chosen and ask God for an answer. Ask divinity, ask God to solve your problem. And it doesn't say that. It says you're to go to the place where God has chosen and you'll solve your own problem. Now, there's a higher court. There's an appeals procedure, as it were. You go to the Levite, you go to the elder, you go to the magistrate. But it's a human process. It remains a process which sanctifies human intelligence, moral imagination, and moral judgment. You're not permitted to short circuit that by some mystical appeal to a supernatural source. You're to work out the problem on your own, which I take to be an example of the Torah's insistence that we behave like adults. Is there something deeply infantilizing about having to go to your mama or your papa every time you have a problem and asking them to solve the problem for you? There's something deeply adult in saying, I have been given the gifts, the blessings of intelligence and moral imagination, and the responsibility to make moral judgments, the responsibility to govern and lead a community. And even if I make mistakes, the fact that I'm reaching forward toward that level of responsibility is sanctified by the Torah, sanctified in this place. And that doesn't mean you can't ask God for some help, or at least for some confidence as you go through the process. But I'm really taken by the sanctification of reason, the sanctification of responsibility, the elevation of our own moral judgment to a level of, as it were, revelation in the determination of what a community is supposed to do. Mark, how do you read that commandment?
Yeah, well, you and I both love baseball, and I always took this as the umpire mitzvah. This is the way baseball works. And it also, through baseball, which is the greatest game, for lots of reasons, but one of the reasons is it's the most like life. Baseball's the most like life. In baseball, like life, mostly nothing happens. And then something happens, and you're either there for the play or you're not. And then you may get a chance to redeem yourself later, but you may not. You just don't know. And there's no clock because you don't know when the game's going to end. So that's why I love baseball. And the thing I love most about baseball, believe it or not, are umpires. Because umpires teach us a lesson. They say, look, I'm going to get some of this wrong. The normal judgment I've heard is that umpires at home plate get about 30% of strikes and balls wrong. Okay, but it doesn't matter that they get it wrong. That would be the standard of truth, absolute truth. What matters is that they are the umpire. And because of them, the game goes on. He says it's a ball. It might have been a strike, but who cares? We're going to move on with the game based on what the umpire says. And that puts the game in our control. And the same is true with asking God. What does it mean to ask God? You sit around and wait for God to what? Open the sky and speak in thunder and lightning? First of all, people would be too scared. Secondly, that's not going to happen. So these judges that you refer to beautifully, they're the ones who put it on earth. Lo b'shamayim. It's not in heaven, it's on earth. And they enable the game to go on. And just like baseball, so too is our legal system. You need judges. Do they get stuff wrong? Yes. That's one of the strongest arguments against capital punishment. That because we get stuff wrong, we can't execute people because you can't reverse it. So I very much like the idea that the Torah was written not to be in heaven, but to give us rules and procedures on earth that we can follow.
So there is a movement, because you know these things, to replace umpires with computers.
Yes, there is a movement. They're trying it in the minor leagues.
You have cameras and you have computers, and you'll
get
it right.
They did it in tennis, and it wiped out John McEnroe's rants. Because what's he going to yell at, a computer?
And in football, they do instant replay sometimes. So
yeah, that's right. Yes, that's right. And I think that's the tension. The tension is we want the truth, but we also want the game to go on without insane delays.
Well, I wouldn't do it insane delays. I actually think that what you said before is even deeper than that. We want an objective truth if it's available. If it's available. But on the other hand, in real life, not just in baseball, but in real life, truth is created by a community. Truth is a way that we adjudicate a circumstance and evaluate a circumstance, and it's done among us. It's done within a community. Now, we create a procedure for that. So in a jury system, you have 12 people who listen to the evidence, and there's rules of evidence and rules of cross-examination and certain questions that are acceptable and not acceptable. We've all seen these things on television, these court cases on television. But it's ultimately something that we agree to. And the question is, can we as a human community, can we as a national community, right now this is a huge question in America, can we agree to certain standards of truth? And can we trust each other? Can we trust each other not to, as it were, game the system? Can we trust each other not to bend the rules, to bend the procedure? Is there a commitment to keeping truth alive in the community? And that's what's at stake here.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And that's what the Torah is trying to get to. In the beginning, it tells us that you're to set up Shotrim v'Shoftim. You set up your own judges. Now think about that. That's the whole Torah. The premise of the whole Torah portion is that I, God, am not going to come and adjudicate every case. You're going to do it for yourselves. And then it says, don't take bribes. Right away, it recognizes that this has to be done with a certain degree of integrity. It has to be done with a great deal of discipline. It has to be done with a commitment to truth and a commitment to justice. Otherwise, the system doesn't work.
And the one other word, the big word is trust. You have to trust in the system. You have to trust the umpires. I just saw the Netflix series on untold stories of bad stuff that's happened, and one of them was the point shaving by an umpire in the NBA. And it's particularly bad, even though it's only a game. I mean, millions of dollars were made by the mob, betting on these fixed games. But the main thing is people who love the game can't love it if they don't trust the umpires. And the same is true in work we do, Ed. I think often, and you and I are both consulted by young rabbis who, for some strange reason, want our advice on things. And I can't tell you the number of times when they've made rulings that are directly against Jewish law and directly against what Judaism prescribes. And yet they're the umpire of their little game there. And it's important that people trust them. So I felt that very heavily on my shoulders, that when people ask me to make a judgment, that they have to trust the judges. And by the way, it's also not just judges, it's shotrim, it's cops. It's not just judges, it's police. You need to trust, and that's definitely evaporated. And that you've just pointed to the fracture in our culture right now.
And the question too is, can you create human beings who have sufficient integrity and sufficient discipline to hold the system as sacred, rather than trying to win for a particular side?
Yes.
Rather than try to win for a particular side. And this is the whole question about the integrity of elections. This is a question about the integrity of, there's an integrity to the system. You don't want to bend it. Yes, I want my side to win, but I realize that if my side wins at the expense of the institutional structure, at the expense of the community, then I don't really win in the long term. I may win in the short term, right? An umpire who bends the rules, who bends the calls in order to let one team win over the other because he thinks it's better that this team wins rather than the other, destroys the game for us all.
Yep.
Destroys the whole fun of sport. And in the same way it happens in politics, the same way it happens in science, the scientist who bends the data in order to achieve even if he has the most wonderful motives, he really believes in the cure that he's coming up with. If the data isn't right, the system is compromised. And when the system becomes compromised, the institutional structure becomes compromised, then there's a long-term disease that infects the body politic, and that becomes a very difficult issue. Now, a little bit later in the Parsha, the next chapter, in the 18th chapter, we have a law which I know appeals to you a great deal. It says you will not consult the dead when you have a question. And this has to do with what's called necromancy, right? I want to go ask my ancestors for some guidance if I have to make an issue. I want to go find the answer by talking to dead people. It used to be something which was considered rather superstitious. Maybe it's a measure of our world that it's become rather popular again. So talk to me about this, Mark. What does that mean? Is that part of the same idea of trusting your intelligence, of trusting your own moral judgment? And is there more to it than that?
Oh yeah, there's way more to it than that. But you're so right that it's become a part of our culture. Every week there's a market here in Aspen, and they've got corn and vegetables and fruit and baked goods and jewelry and tchotchkes. And there's always an astrologer there. There's another one up the road in Basalt on Sunday. They got the same corn and veggies, and they got another astrologer.
So you get cucumbers and predictions and
prophecies. A reading.
Prophecies, right.
Yes, right. So it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And it's in the newspapers and all of that. And people are hooked by it. And it became a real issue with my friendship with Tom Hartman, which led to this story. But let me set it up by looking at what the Torah is actually prohibiting. It's the Doresh al Hametim. That's the Toeva, that's the abomination. One who inquires of the dead. So it's prohibiting us talking to dead people. But it's not prohibiting dead people talking to us. And that's where the loophole is. Because dead people can talk to us. And I'm about to tell you a story about how dead people have talked to me. And I just want you to remember, everyone listening, the guy who's telling you this story also has a PhD in philosophy. So when you think I'm totally around the bend, you may be right, but I'm a credentialed intellectual. And there's reasons to believe me. Maybe not this story, but there's reasons. And here it is. So when I met Tom back in '87, he was already close friends with several psychics on Long Island. They considered him their advisor, their priest. And unfortunately, they dedicated their books, when they published books, to Tommy, to Father Tom Hartman, my priest, my friend, and the believer in the psychic energy of the universe. All right. The bishop was not thrilled about this because it violates Catholic catechism. Talking to dead people is not only a violation of Deuteronomy 18:11, but it's a violation of Catholic law too. And the reason it's a violation in the Torah is that it was part of idolatry. And the Torah, particularly Deuteronomy, which in this Parsha says that whoever does some of this stuff, they should be taken out and stoned to death. So it was a serious issue for the biblical tradition, idolatry. And that was one of the things that they did. There's even some speculation that we did it, that on the high priest's breastplate, there was a pouch that held two things called the Urim and the Thummim. And no one knows what they were, but Rambam and others say they were dice. And he would throw these dice to determine the future. So it's a very appealing thing because, like you say, it's gaming the system. It's figuring out, hey, can I figure, what the lottery numbers are or what's going on? And so what happened was the bishop came down on him pretty hard and said, Tom, you've got to stop your associations with these people. Tommy was like me. He was, if you tell him, oh, yeah, his response was, oh, yeah. And so he wasn't going with that. But because I was his new best friend, I said, look, Tom, you and I have some credibility already. You don't want to throw that away by being depriested, by being defrocked. You don't want the bishop coming down on you. And frankly, I think some of the people that you're supporting, because you're a lovely guy and a trusting, wonderful human being, some of these guys are con men. They're just con men. And he said, no, Mark, you're wrong. They're real. They're talking to dead people. He said, I'll show you. There's a reading tonight over in Deer Park, and you and Betty come with me. So I said, okay. So we go to this modest little home in a working class area on Long Island. And there's a psychic, I won't say his name. And he's sitting in a room, and there's maybe 30, 35 people, all of whom have lost someone. And it's an Italian Catholic community. So you got to assume 99% of them are Italian Catholics. And he starts with a pen going over a paper and he's into his thing. And he's saying, I'm getting a message. Someone's coming across. And then he says, does anyone here know a Maria? 50 hands go up. Because it's a room filled with Italian Catholics. And I kicked Tommy in the knees and I said, oh, that was slick. He guesses that in a room of 50 Italian Catholics, someone knew a Maria. So that was the kind of stuff that I would tell him, but it didn't make a difference. He said, Mark, these people bring comfort to the grieving. I said, no, I don't see it that way, Tom. I think people who consult psychics are putting a roadblock in their grief work. They're saying, no, the person who died, my father, my husband, they're just waiting to talk to them. They're not really dead. And if I got their phone number and this guy's got their phone number, I can talk to them and it'll be just like before, except they aren't here, but at least I could talk to them. And so that was the dispute we had, from 87 until, 2010. And we would argue about it and he'd say, oh, Jim Henson died of the Muppets and he came through to one of my psychic friends. And he said, blah, blah, blah. And I said, thank you, Tom. Stop. Just stop. So finally, he calls me and says, I have Parkinson's and I'm dying. And I knew that I didn't know you then, or I would have called you, Eddie, to help me. But I had nobody. It's like that old joke. Guy comes to his rabbi, says, I'm in grief because my friend died. The rabbi says, well, go to Carlini, the clown in the next village. He's a great clown and he has a great smile and his smile will heal you. And the man looks at his rabbi and says, Rabbi, you don't understand. I am Carlini. So I was Carlini and I was broken. And Tommy's dying, but he was still lucid at the time. And I said, okay, Tom, when you die, let's settle this thing about is there an Olam Haba? Let's just settle it. Send me a sign when you're dead that it's real. That's all I'm asking. And he said, okay, I'll do that. And he said, what sign do you want? I said, no. Don't tell me the sign, because if you tell me you're going to send me a red bird, every time I see a red bird, I'm going to say, oh, there it is. No. All I want is this. The sign has to be totally unambiguous. It can't be interpreted by anyone else except that it's you. And it can't be through a psychic. I don't believe in those guys and women. I don't believe in what they do. It has to be directly from you, unambiguous and from you. He said, okay. So he dies in 2016, and I'm waiting for a sign and nothing. 2017, nothing. 2018, I'm coming in every year to do a high holiday sermon at my synagogue on Long Island. And second day Rosh Hashanah, it was a tradition that I would go to a diner with a friend of ours who introduced us, Mike Pescucci, and we'd have chicken salad at the Celebrity Diner on Jericho Turnpike. It was like our little tradition. So we're having chicken salad, and he says to the other people who were having lunch with us, I want you all to leave. I got to talk to Mark. So they all leave the table. They're very confused. I was confused. Michael leans over to me and says, Mark, who was Saul? He asked me this question. Who was Saul? I said, Michael, what are you talking about? He says, well, let me tell you. This morning when I was shaving, Tom Hartman's ghost came to visit me. And I'm shaving, and he says to me, hi, Michael, so you're going to have lunch with my best friend today? And Michael said, yeah, I'm having lunch with Mark, chicken salad. And he said, well, when you see Mark, tell him that Saul thinks he's in charge of heaven, and heaven is the most beautiful place you've ever seen. So the hair is standing up on my arms. And I look at Michael and I say, Michael, Saul is my dead father. He died in 2007. And this is exactly Tom Hartman's sense of humor. And it's exactly what my father would be like in the Olam Haba. My father was always a spritzer and a schmoozer, which is where I guess I got it. And he would always talk to people, and he would think he was in charge of heaven. That was my father. So it all made sense. And there was no way, you see, that Michael could have known Saul's name. I never spoke to Michael about my father. He never asked me about my father. Tommy, of course, had met my dad several times, and he knew Dad. So there was no way to explain this at all, except Dad died, his body disintegrated, went into the ground, his soul and his neshama went to the Olam Haba, and where he thinks he's in charge. And Tommy says, look, heaven's a beautiful place. And it was unambiguous, and it was from Tommy. And Michael says,
it proves that the room with Midwestern Jews is right next to the room with New York Catholics. That's also
I guess that must be. I don't know how they met.
Well, there's no mechitza, obviously.
So Betty's coming to pick me up at the diner. Michael runs out and open the window, Betty. We got a sign. And to this day, I tell people, look, it's real. There's a real life after we die in the world to come. We believed it. We pray for it. It's in the El Mulei Rachamim. It's in our Torah blessings. It's in all of our texts. And it's real. So if you're asking me, is all of this talking to dead people real? My answer is, yeah, it's real. Do I think it's something we should be pursuing? No, I agree with the Torah. Talk to living people. First of all, they can talk back to you and they're more interesting and they need your help. And the dead people you can talk to when you're dead. And that's my view about it. And there's no other way to explain the story. And there it is.
And I suspect that many, many people have similar stories like that.
They do.
And I think that but I think the moral of the story, though, is this, that what you got from the conversation, what you got from the sign, as it were, is a reassurance.
Yes.
It's an embrace. The sign didn't tell you go convert to some other faith. The sign didn't tell you go hurt somebody or go invest money. If you're going to take that kind of, technical wisdom advice from signs beyond, then it's a little strange, because then you're relinquishing your rationality. But in this case, what it did was it reassured you. It reassured you that the universe is bigger than you think it is, and that the boundaries that we think of our reality are really permeable boundaries. And it doesn't compromise your rationality at all. I know you, Gellman, and you're a supremely rational person. PhD aside, you're a rational person in the way that you conduct yourself in the world, the way you think things through. This doesn't affect that.
No.
But on the other hand, it's a reassurance of a certain quality of the universe, which I think is very comforting and very powerful.
It was enormously powerful because it was proof. Now, I don't live my life looking for proof. In fact, I was sort of sad that I got the proof, because it deprives me of the ability to believe in it with blind faith.
No, it still takes a good deal of faith to believe in this. A lot of people would have just dismissed that as some kind of strange thing. But how do
you dismiss it? He never knew the name of my father.
Lots of ways, but the fact is,
if he was a con man, yes.
No. But the fact is that it reassures you, and I think that's a very powerful thing. It's a gift.
It was, and it was not just about my father.
It's a blessing. It's a blessing
that I would see Dad. It's about you will not be separated forever from those you love. Listen to that. You will not be separated forever from those you love. That's a truth. That is a truth. And it's the truth that our souls are not made of the same stuff as our bodies are made of. Our bodies clearly disintegrate, but there's something more to us. And if you don't like religion's explanation, think of it a different way. Think of your I-ness, your consciousness. There's no place in your brain where your consciousness resides. No scientist has ever found out. They know where your balance is, where your ability to think is, your prefrontal cortex. They know all that.
It's not
but they
physical.
don't know where you are. There's no Marc Gellman gland. There's no Marc Gellman lobe. My I-ness, my me. When I was a little baby, I was me. I was Marc Gellman. Now I'm an old guy. I'm Marc Gellman. It's the same guy, but every cell in my body has been regenerated thousands of times. My personality is different than when I was a baby, obviously, but it's still me. It's still me in every way, and that doesn't go away. Mm-hmm. That's the point of it.
Right. No, I think, and it's a beautiful story. And I imagine if we were to ask those who listen, has anyone else had a similar experience? I imagine we would get dozens of testimonies back.
Well, I write a weekly column for Tribune called The God Squad. You can get it by Googling God Squad articles by Marc Gellman. And for the last weeks, when I told the story in my column, I asked people for signs that they've had. And my column's been inundated.
Sure.
With signs from people that are not just a butterfly came along. Some of them are like that. But some are really
powerful.
Yeah. Today I got a sign from someone who wrote, I asked God, I was sick, and I asked God, will you stay with me through this? And I heard yes. And the guy said it this way. He said it was a voice that wasn't a voice.
Yeah. Oh, called the Mamataka, right.
Yes.
Right. The voice of the
people
silence.
Are willing to share this with you if you give them permission to do it.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing.
That's what Mordecai Kaplan missed. This is what he missed. He missed the spooky parts.
Not spooky. No, not spooky parts. His definition of reality was too small.
Yes, it was.
It was too narrow. It was too small. And it left out important parts of our experience and our being, important parts of our being and our experience in the name of the humanism that should have taken those things very, very seriously because they're part of human experience and part of human aspiration.
That's brilliant.
No, that's exactly what it is. Well, thank you, Mark. Welcome back. It's a delight to share Torah with you again. And to everyone who's listening, a delight to share Torah with you again. Let me remind you that following this broadcast service from Valley Beth Shalom at 10 o'clock, you're welcome to watch us or come down to the show and join us. We'd love to see you. Yontif is coming in a month. Please find the synagogue near you that you resonate with and go and sit and pray and join the congregation and join the rabbi in teaching and join the community in sharing the celebration of a new year. We all need it this year. We need the uplift. We need the cleansing. We need the strength. So I wish all of you Shana Tova, and Mark a good Shabbos and Shana Tova.
It's good to be back.